G'day, fans, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sci-Fi Zone. Claire and myself are back yet again to gasbag about science fiction stuffs on a Monday night. Yay, team. How are we going? Claire, how are you going? You're having a whale of a time over there?
Oh, yeah, super exciting.
Absolutely fantastic. And as always, we've got Ange joining us at the moment, which is absolutely fantastic. And as always, it's been a big week in science fiction stuffs. Well, maybe it hasn't, but depending on your perspectives on what we've been doing. And yeah, we got the lockdowns, we got the COVID and all that other crap. Yeah. Bullshit. We're here to sort of put a smile on your dial if you're feeling a bit down in the dumps. And we've got people joining us already, which is absolutely fantastic. Big show as per the usual. What do you reckon, Claire? You're looking forward to a big show?
Oh, it's going to be huge.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Now, we're going to kick it off with some of our usual sights and sounds, what we've seen in our travels recently. And Claire, you've got an absolute classic that you want to bring up regarding things that you saw walking around the streets. What have you got?
It's just this really cute little thing. I go for walks around the neighbourhood. I'm quite close to Darebin Creek walking trail. So I go for walks all the time at lunchtime since I'm working from home. And I noticed in one of my neighbours' yards, they've got these cute little robots just swinging from a tree. They make me smile every time I walk past them. They just live out in the front yard, swinging from a tree. I think they're just really cute. Just something.
You know why? You know why you thought that they were really cute? Because one of those represents you, and the other one represents me.
Oh. I'm not going to ask you which one's which.
Hey, sorry?
I'm not going to ask you which one's which.
If there's a pretty-looking one, you can have that one, and if there's a really dorky-looking one, and that one in the bottom right-hand corner, that looks pretty damn dorky. I'll take that one. So, dear, that is very, very cool. So where are these? Sort of just around your neighbourhood, yeah?
Yeah, literally 2 doors down from my house. They're just out in their front yard, so I walk past them most days. And it's really cool, just something that makes me smile, something that little bit science fiction-y, makes me feel like I fit in the area.
Very, very cool. What you need to do for the homeowners is you go up there and you start like playing with them or whatever, and the owner will come and go, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" And you say, "Look, I'm just doing the Star Trek mind meld. I'm trying to, like feel the Catra of these robots." Oh dear! Oh, hang on, I pressed the wrong button. So there we go. I was going to say for myself. This is what happens when I start laughing. I lose track of what I'm doing. So there was a thing on Facebook recently about car plates that you can put on your cars, not number plates, but plates that sit on the back, right? And they're made by a company and they're already like pre-done and whatever, and you stick them on the back of your car. And I thought that was actually kind of groovy. What do you reckon of that? So you got your TARDIS. I don't know what the Chameleon Edition thing happens to be, but what do you reckon? Do you reckon that's kind of cool?
Yeah, I do actually. I've got one that someone gave me that's a Trek one.
That's coming up. So you've got your dilithium warp drive one. So that's on the. So they, I assume cool. They just stick on the back of the car and the whole thing. And you've got your little booby prize up there, which is kind of cool. And you could argue that's potentially a Borg cube on the side over there and over there. But I reckon they're kind of groovy cute. And very. Sorry.
They're cute. I like them.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they're chrome and that. This is the kind of thing where 3D printing would do wonders, whereas once upon a time you couldn't get these for love of money. For Star Wars fans, of course, you've got the old twin iron engine, the old TIE fighter out there, and it looks very, very groovy. And if you're a bit of a fan of your hitchhikers, you've got your improbability drive, which is
cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Someone's going to be out shopping for one of these very, very soon by the sounds of it. So,
that
is good stuff. Colin said, could the robot invasion of Earth hang on, could that or has it begun? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Nothing to see. Robot inspector. So, the robots. Durfred. So, yes, it's a dodgy version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's what it is. So, what do you reckon?
I think they're too cute and having too much fun to be invaders.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Now, I've just got to. Well, that's how things work, isn't it? It's like E.T. was like that. E.T. was a cute alien, and like people didn't know this. They thought he was here just picking vegetables for the crew, but he was ready. He was part of an invasion force, mate. They were going to come over and take over the world, and he was the runt of the litter. So, don't think that for a moment that E.T. was all that cutesy little character that you thought he was. So, yes. Very good stuff. Now, we're not into usually like presenting news and the latest of this and the latest of that. But having said that, the recent Matrix trailer came out this week. And I don't know what you think, but a lot of people have said, mate, it's just John Wick. It's just John Wick in space because he looks identical to John Wick. What do you reckon?
Oh, well, I mean, he looks like him, sure. But, I mean, that's what the Matrix was, in a way, a precursor almost to the John Wick character, in a way, I think. I got excited about it. I mean, I've seen one of the John Wick movies, but I'm probably not as familiar with that as other people are. But I watched the trailer as a Matrix movie, and I got quite excited about the idea. I think it could be really good.
Very, very groovy. Yeah, I got to say, it didn't really appeal to me that much. It's like one of the things, I guess, is the bit of the issues is that, like, it's like, well, why now? Why didn't they do this like 12 years ago or 10 years ago? It was like, I don't know. But you know, it's each of their own. If they can somehow make the story, improve the story over what they did for the last two movies, then good luck to them. But it was just funny. They must have said to just Keanu Reeves, unless he was under contract, he's saying, I'm doing another John Wick movie. I can't change my look. And they said, nah, don't worry about it. You look so cool. We'll just leave you as you are. So that's what I think would be kind of bizarre. But anyway, so they've released it now, and what will be. And there's a lot of fancy shots, as there always is. And it's good to see, I've forgotten the lady's name, who plays Trinity. She was Carrie-Anne Moss back in it. So that alone is a very, very cool thing. So
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
I know the worst part is at the moment you can't see anything. Bloody all the movies keep getting pushed back. We're all June, got pushed back again.
I know. I thought of you when I heard that, Dags.
Yeah. It's like, there you go. So yeah, it's never going to get here. And in the end, you're just going to say, fine, I'll just watch it on a streaming service once they get premiered, and away we go. So what do you do? Now, is there anything you want to bring up before I push some buttons and we start getting into some very interesting stuffs?
No, I'm happy to get into it, Dags. I really want to. I'm interested in the topic we're talking about, the whole immortality thing. So as far as I'm concerned, you can just start pushing buttons and get into it.
Very, very cool. So we need to have a bit of a chat now. I'm going to actually bring up something that we brought up last week, which I actually thought was actually quite interesting. I made a comment about something, you responded to it, and what you said made a hell of a lot of sense. And I realised afterwards, laying in bed, this is how tragic my life has become. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. So give me a second, just got to tee it up. And so I'll play this in the full screen. So you can you only go through like maybe 30, 40 seconds, but this is in relating to what we spoke about last week in regards to our dystopian talk. So sit tight and see how we go. This is where I think Michelle's comment about Elysium and to a degree Blade Runner is very, very similar as well. I personally think that if it all went to the hell in a handbasket, the elite, whoever they happen to be, would say, oh, we'll just stuff the Earth, live on a space station. And all the rich people go and live on that. And they actually replicate things on Earth up on this space station, including houses and gardens and all the rest of it. But only the wealthy people can live there, okay? And all the poor people are left on Earth.
I think it's actually a very difficult thing to pull off, to only have the elite in one place. I think there's always going to be a need for grunts, for lack of a better term, to do grunt work. And like even things like security and that kind of stuff, you have to manage that somehow, and not everyone who's rich and powerful is going to want to do that kind of work.
So I looked at that comment last week, and because idiot me said, oh, you get mechanicals and androids and all sort of bullshit. I thought, that ain't going to work. I thought, but hang on. I realised that this is why I was laying in bed, and I thought, you know what, you hit the nail right on the head, in that you would need all those people, but they would be the privileged bunch who get to work in these places. And effectively, you could argue, using Elysium as an example, that it's like Downton Abbey, right? You got all the elite people living upstairs, but the poor people living downstairs, of the servants, are happy to be there because they are the lucky ones who got the gig to be there in the first place. And that to me makes a lot of sense. So it's like saying, well, I got the shit job, but it's the best of the shit jobs versus what's down here on Earth. And I'm surprised I didn't think of that at the time, but I wanted to bring that up tonight because I thought, well, because last week I said about androids and machines and whatever, and I thought, that's freaking stupid. So well done, Claire. You hit the nail on the head on that one. So
it's interesting too, because that has the potential to divide society even further, because that whole upstairs downstairs thing, like in Downton Abbey, you know, well, it's like on the Titanic. The rich people lived in these amazing suites and ballrooms and all that kind of stuff, while everyone else down underneath, you know, under the water level, literally, were living completely different lives. So it really has the potential to sort of separate society even more than it already is.
Yeah, and of course the interesting thing would be that if you had somebody who was employed up there as a cleaner or whatever else, and as soon as you start thinking, you know what, I'm not getting paid enough, and I could do with a bigger room to sleep in. As soon as the owners say, "Do you want to go back to Earth?" I'm like, "Nah, I'll stay here, thanks. It's all good."
Yeah, more power, more control. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly right. And just quickly, someone mentioned it was mentioned last week about Logan's Run being a dystopian society. We said it wasn't, and of course you got to remember.
Wasn't.
I said it wasn't, no, because the people who live there, all the youngins, they're sort of living this hedonistic society. But we know what carousel is, but they don't. They just go to renew. So as far as they're concerned, it's the greatest thing in the entire universe. So the fact that they live happy for that entire amount of time is a testament to the good fortune that they've got. So yes, that's how I interpret it anyway. So. But anyway, that's not getting us to the main topic of our natter for today. So I just want to get those things out of the way, which we've done. We're going to be talking about the quest for immortality. How groovy is that? Now, there's something I really want to bring up. Once again, it was actually from last week, and it was actually a comment from one of our watchers. I was going to say listeners there for a second. One of our people, Michelle. And I'm just going to play this. So just give me a second. It only goes for like 10 seconds. And it's directly relevant to what we're going to be discussing. Okay, so sit tight. I'll just put it on the screen here like this, and off we go. Michelle said that Richard Branson is working on building a cruise ship and space travel. Now, it's very funny that you should bring him up, because we're going to be discussing a topic next week that links personally directly to him. So I was one of the reasons why we're discussing this today is because people like Richard Branson, the other guy, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos are all going completely spazzo with the whole, space travel and all this sort of business, right? They got all the money, they got all the resources, right? They've clearly got the drive, and the world's behind them, and it's all fantastic. But all three of them are short on one thing. What do you reckon it is?
Time.
It's exactly right. They're all mortal, right? And it's all well and good to say, yep, they want to achieve these things, and good on them. I'm not being critical of that at all, but it's the one thing that would hound them to say, well, we really want to travel into space, go to Mars, go to Jupiter, whatever. But none of those three guys, especially Richard Branson, are likely to sort of set a day. So it's almost, you could argue, either spending all your time and resources and effort saying we want to achieve this technological advantage, but on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, okay, how do you get to see more of it in your lifetime? Create immortality, so you can live long enough to see it. And I thought that's an interesting sort of scenario to saying, okay, well, what is immortality? How would it work? What are the pros and what are the cons? And is it as, fantastic at face value when you sort of see it written down? Oh, mate, okay, here's the pill to make me immortal. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And that's what we're here to chat about. So there you go. What do you think, Claire?
What do I think? I think I can't think of anything worse than living forever. I mean, living for a long time, yes, absolutely. But living forever, not being able to die, I think that would, that's not something I would want.
So any particular reason?
Well, I guess it depends on what the limitations are too. If you're thinking of us as being a human being, so a person, so limited to this body, and at the moment, at least, this planet, how can I put it? The breadth of experience that you can have in one lifetime, one lifetime, I think, is probably enough. 2 or 3 maybe for some people, but immortality, I think you would go out of your mind with boredom. I guess there's the potential for that to change. I mean, we're already trying to get to the stars, and that would expand horizons and all that kind of stuff. But even so, I think there's a limit to what you can experience, what one person can experience.
It brings up a very, very good point, and Thomas has hit the nail on the head straight away regarding his comment here about everyone you see, and that happens like even today. So you'll have somebody who's celebrated 110th birthday, and it's like, it's fantastic, it's awesome, it's great, but the problem, the downside to that is that aside, you've probably seen all your friends pass away, and your family, even your own children have grown up and died of old age, even potentially even your grandkids, and that would be hard to sort of deal with. So if you said, sorry, when I'm saying, I don't mean you personally, but if you said, I've got the pill for immortality, you would have to distance yourself from everybody. And this is what sort of touched on in Highlander a little bit when, was it McLeod? Is that his name? Had his relationship with a lady, but she grew old and died, and he just stayed the same. And that would be heartbreaking, having to go through that over and over and over again.
Over again. Yeah. It'd be interesting. I mean, it's an interesting thought, because there are two ways it can go. Either you do go through what Connor McLeod goes through. What is it? What are you laughing at?
It's coming from bloody Aaron. Every time you watch The Empire Strikes Back, freaking nerds, mate. Tell you what, you could watch every episode of Days of Our Lives and Coronation Street and EastEnders that go for like 50 billion years, and you've got plenty of time to watch all that. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, because Coronation Street's how I would want to spend my immortality. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, the different ways it could go. Now I've forgotten what I was saying.
We can blame Aaron for that, so there you go.
You could either, well, as you said, Connor McLeod in Highlander went through heartbreak over and over again. So you could either be the kind of person who does continue to have their heart broken over and over again, form relationships, fall in love, meet people, all those kinds of things, and then have to deal with every single one of them passing away. Or you go the opposite route and just, as you were saying, Dags, completely distance yourself from anyone and everyone and just become an entity in your own right. My problem with that, I can see the appeal, because you wouldn't have to deal with the emotion, you wouldn't have to deal with any of that sort of stuff. But my problem with that is that even further limits what you can experience. And if you're immortal, you're going to be looking for those experiences. And I think you'd eventually get to a point where you'd sort of have to realize that, that's a whole thing that maybe you haven't explored yet, that maybe you would, I think, in the end.
You're right. It actually sort of follows a similar vein. This is very, very sort of just a slide aside. Extremely highly wealthy people versus normal people. The thing with I can't think what else. A normal person is that if you want something that's expensive, you've got to save up for it. You've got to spend time waiting for it. You can go out and buy it. And when you get it, you really appreciate it. But when you're wealthy, you go, I want one of those. I'll just go and buy it. And there's no challenge. There's nothing there to say, well, that was stimulating. I've got it. I'll move on to the next thing. So maybe you're right. Once you've just got 100, 200 years, 300 years down the track, depending on how the world progresses in that time, you might be thinking, it's like, I've seen enough of it now. I don't know how to cope. It's kind of funny, because I did think that if immortality was going, say, from an individual 500-600 years ago, say 1200 AD, right? So the year 1200. So between 1200 and 1700, so 500 years later, nothing would have changed. The Industrial Revolution hasn't started yet. Everything looks identical. You can't say, well, I wonder what's happening in the other side of the world, because the other side, North America, hasn't been discovered yet. So you're just thinking, how freaking boring is this? There's no internet.
It's interesting you should say that, because one of my favourite sort of immortality stories is The Man from Earth, which Ange introduced me to, actually. Hi, Ange. Because that's what that is. The guy has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and spent life. I can't remember exactly how far back he started, but long before anything interesting was happening from our point of view, and he was having to move from group to group of people when that was not done. If you were a stranger, you were the enemy. And moving across the country in a time when people didn't do that, when it wasn't easy to travel and all that kind of stuff, and just having to live through all that time when kind of nothing interesting was happening. So the only thing he had would be to explore new places and meet new people. And again, that kind of goes back to that, do you make connections with people or do you not? All that kind of stuff. If you get a chance, if you haven't seen The Man from Earth, the movie, It's brilliant. It's really well written. It's a very simple story, but absolutely worth watching.
I love the concept you're saying. He'd be so bored. You could say, geez, I'm bored to death, but he's immortal. He can't die.
Exactly.
I love that. It's like, yeah, I'm going to travel to see places, but there's no boats, no planes. It makes it a bit hard, doesn't it?
Yes,
anyway,
definitely.
I'm joking. I'm being facetious. So there's a few comments here. Thomas says, you get to see the progress, which is probably, if there's a pro, that would be the pro. You get to see how the Earth progresses. But of course, what if it doesn't progress in the way that you want it to progress and some things start going backwards? And in this day and age, there's plenty of people thinking that could potentially happen. Now, there's a comment from someone actually from Twitch who's joined us, which is absolutely fantastic. Keep breeding with them and your offspring, and you eventually create a version of yourself. Well, there's potentially, that's sort of definitely an offshoot that is always likely to occur. That somewhere down the track, you meet someone and you're actually like a distant relative to that person. Absolutely, you can certainly cross paths, and you never know. William said going to university for the 34th time. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that having children thing is an interesting question, because in a lot of stories of immortality, for whatever reason, they can't have children, so the immortality doesn't get passed on, which simplifies it in terms of fiction. But in reality, how would that work?
Yeah, and of course we're working the assumption that a single individual becomes an immortal. What if someone says, oh, we've got the pill, take your COVID vaccination, and someone says, oh, the offshoot of that is you're going to live forever, and it's like the whole world is never going to die. Oh my goodness gracious. Sorry. What?
No, go on. I was gonna move on to the next kind of.
Okay. I'm just going on. Here's something a bit of funny. You know about this: the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, chasing down everybody. You remember that? Whoever this character was? It's an immortal character in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that's spent an eternity chasing down every being and personally insulting them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In alphabetical order.
Personally insulting everyone in the universe in alphabetical order.
Yeah, exactly right.
Just to give himself something to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what we were discussing earlier about the boredom thing. It would be interesting to see how a person who's lived for 200 plus years think of the worlds that are currently. They're probably thinking, "Oh my goodness, it's about time the world has progressed." But I mean, in the you think of a space of a single lifetime, how much changes, like between like the time that you and I were kids to today. The amount of advancements. Now we're talking technological advancements. You could also go for cultural and sociological and all that other stuff. And you'd be thinking, my God, how much is like advanced in that a period of time? But I suppose if you've been around 200 years prior, it's hard to say whether you'd be going, oh, I'm seeing it just like really take off, or they're just not dialing into it. Sorry.
Well, that's the thing. It would depend on what time period you're talking about, because up until the last 100 years or so, it's been pretty slow. But if you look at the last century and this century, then things have actually moved really quickly. And there's a fair chance that it'll keep accelerating and things will get more and more interesting. But there's also a chance that it'll stop.
So, Angela's comment about finding another immortal. We're working on the assumption it's a single individual and it's just you and nobody else, right? Now, we're not talking like vampires who can like bite other people and they become vampires too and all that sort of thing. We're saying it's just you and nobody else. And of course, that could be the evil doctor, if you will, has worked out, got the magic pill. Now, the evil doctor can do one of two things. He either say, I'll take it myself and that's it. I don't tell anybody I'm immortal, or I share it with the world for whatever reason. Okay, make $1 billion bucks out of it or whatever. So we're assuming it's a single individual, because once you start replicating, as we said earlier, if there's groups of people, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000, million, whatever, that's a completely different story.
Changes
but
everything.
We're working on it's a special person, because your Richard Bransons of the world be thinking that's the one thing they're missing. Give them that and they'll be able to just like set the world on fire. As Aaron said, sorry, Angela, there can be only one. Exactly right.
Yes.
So there's a good point that's this has already been brought up. It was being brought up by Thomas, and I was going to jump into this bit later on about artificial machines and using an example. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit here. In the book's Prelude to Dune, not the Dune current story, but the Prelude to Dune, there were these individuals, and they realized that they were mortal. They were going to only live to a certain point in Karkin. And they said, well, the only way to survive is to transfer your physical brain, whatever bits that are required to keep it functioning, into a machine, right? And they just existed as a machine. And Bicentennial Man, you could argue, is a similar thing, and various other scenario. So if you're in a machine, of course, a physical mechanical device, not a human being shape, it could be anything like a spider or a freaking whatever. And but the idea is you still keep your consciousness. And is that the solution? Providing you keep the brain powering, whether that be through artificial means or whatever, that may be one way it could be done. And I would not be surprised if someone somewhere out in the big wide world has already thought about that.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
That's more and more what's happening. I'm just going to point out that Bicentennial Man is not the best example because he was actually a robot to begin with.
Yeah, true.
So it's not the same thing. But that whole idea of putting your mind, your essence, yourself into a computer, more and more often these days it's into the computer, it's into the internet somewhere, that kind of thing is what's being suggested. To me, it feels like that's probably the most realistic possibility when it comes to immortality. But what I still struggle with is the idea of, I guess it's a lot of people would describe it as the soul, but the essence of yourself. I mean, you can store all the memories, all the events, all the pictures, all the images, all that sort of stuff, but we don't really know what it is that holds all that together and turns us into a person. And until we know that, that idea of being put into a mechanical storage unit of any kind isn't going to work.
I think that's actually very a smart. I'm trying to think of it. You're right. That's what I'm trying to say. I should have just said that in the first place. You're right. It was because it occurred to me one of two things could happen if you said, all right, I've transferred my brain into a machine, mate, I'm going to live forever. And next week you're depressed as all hell because it's like, well, all right, what do I do now? I'm still part of me. I agree with the soul thing. Like your entire essence isn't there. But if your conscious thoughts were there, it doesn't mean you're still not impervious to things like, as I was saying, depression and being down and thinking, well, is this all that I am? Is there nothing more? Using a quote from Star Trek, The Motion Picture. And I think that would be kind of bizarre. You're saying, well, I've achieved everything, but I'm still not happy. And it's like, well, how do you obtain happiness? Well, you can't. Living forever is the ultimate goal. And you do wonder how many if you're the brain inside the machine, how long before you start getting a spanner to yourself and start taking yourself apart, thinking, I just want to die. And I think that actually is highly likely that would occur. So
that time thing is like how long things would take and all that sort of stuff is really interesting too, because the way machines measure time is quite different. I mean, there's an example in Star Trek with Data in First Contact, right towards the end, where he's, he considered joining the Borg Queen, and Picard asked him how long for, and it was like, 1,000th of a second or something, and to him, that's an eternity. So if a person is stored in a machine, they're more likely to experience time in that way, and that means immortality is even longer. And what do you do? How do you fill in the time? I mean, I guess machines can put themselves on pause maybe for a while and wait and see what happens down the track a little bit. But there are other risks as well, of course.
Absolutely. And I think your personality would change. Okay. So that was what I was trying to think of earlier, and I just realized that afterwards, that you might start off as being a noble, harmonious, well-intentioned person, but as you're a machine and the hundreds of years go past, you start going a bit radio rental, and you start heading down paths that you would never have done as you're in your human self. And I think that would be a definite, and that's what happens in the Dune books, right? They have this thing about after hundreds of thousands of years or whatever it is, they've got this big power struggle going on because that's all they've got left. And I think that the best of intentions would start out okay, and let's use your Richard Bransons of the world and all these people. They go put their brains in a machine. They say, "Yep, we can serve humanity forever," but in time they just go completely off the rails because there's nothing left to achieve. So, yes. Now, sorry, are you going to say something?
Oh, there are lots of things I'm going to say, Dan. But your perspective would change as well. Like, just having that kind of immortality and access to information and all that kind of stuff that we don't have now. I think your perspective on things would change too. So there's that risk of deciding that, you're way better than every other human being on the planet, and therefore why do you need them? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So to be fair, when you're transferred to a machine, you're strictly speaking, you're right. Your consciousness is gone. It's more just Well, it's you. The body is gone, but yeah,
But that's the thing. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's that whole is it actually you? And how until we have a way of transferring that you-ness, I don't think it will work. Yeah.
But I imagine there'd be plenty of people out there who'd be thinking if you could do it, they would do it, not realizing that it may not be the best thing of all. And of course, as human beings, when you live your life to the fullest and you go, I'm ready to drop off the perch at age 90, whatever, and you go, you know what, I've had a good run, it's time for me to switch off, rather than saying, no, I'll just keep on ploughing on. Which sort of brings us to altered carbon, which I know we sort of touched on a couple of weeks ago, the concept of altered carbon. So for those who don't know, who have never seen the show, your consciousness is stored on a disc, which is called a stack, and that's inserted into a body called a sleeve, and you can be of any age, gender, what do you call it? Sort of like height, weight, wherever you come from, and you just carry on in that particular body. So for those who don't know, so if your body dies, they just take the stack out, stick it in another body, and you're good to go. So and I know you're a big fan of carbon, so yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean that there's a few things that we could talk about as far as that goes. In terms of immortality, again, it's the rich. If you can afford it, you can do it. But if you can't afford it, then you can't do it. There are also religious questions that are raised in altered carbon. They're not. It's interesting because they kind of sort of explore them, and they're actually a fairly substantial plot point. But they never, come to any kind of resolution about that. There are some people who, for religious reasons, object to being put into another body or being woken up once their body has died. But there are also questions of the actual longevity. Like there is this thing of getting bored after you live for such a long period of time, and so you get more and more. Well, in this instance, darker and darker hobbies and ideas and things, and the way you think about people changes because, as far as you're concerned, everyone else is just a commodity. You can, buy them and sell them and, put them into different bodies to do whatever you want. There's also the question of inheritance, because that's one of the biggest issues, and we talked a little bit about that before. I mean, if we're working on the idea of one person, altered carbon doesn't meet that criteria because anyone who can afford it can live, in theory at least, forever. I haven't really explored the limits yet because the technology's only been around for a few hundred years, I think, at that point. But then what happens to your kids? Like if you're still alive and you're still running the business and you're still living in the house and the family home and all that kind of stuff, the kids are never going to inherit anything. But you can keep them tied to you by, allowing, controlling their allowances and stuff like that. So this is one of the reasons I love altered carbon so much, because it just goes into so many interesting questions. But yeah, that whole are they going to live forever or are they going to get bored? And there are examples in that series of people who don't want to go on.
So the key thing about altered carbon, as opposed to the discussion we're having earlier, it's a society that has this technology as opposed to an individual. Yeah. And of course, the different way of looking at it is that if you have your consciousness stored on a disk, you can be inserted into just about any body, a physical body. So you could be a girl tomorrow, and then next day you're an old man. And how people sort of deal with that, and some people will deal with it more than others. And of course, how long could it go with because it's technology? Does it have the ability to keep going forever? Or suddenly, we need to upgrade the system because it was based on alien technology. And it's like, we can't upgrade it. So, but based on the concept, you would live longer than you would normally, and you could indulge in more dangerous activities because you think, if I can't get falling off a building, just take the stack out, stick it in another body, and I'm good to go. So,
I mean, there's a couple. There's a couple in that show who their job is to fight to the death over and over again. And the other thing about it is that there can be pauses. So Kovacs, who's the main protagonist, that's the right word for him, is put on pause. Like he's in storage for hundreds of years and has had no experience of living during that period at all. He's just been nothing, like, ones and zeros on a chip, and then gets to come back and continue with a life. So there's that too, which is different from the other kinds of immortality that we've talked about.
Yeah, very, very trippy. Has anybody seen the Tomorrow War? I haven't. Have you?
No, I don't think so.
Sorry, Thomas, you're on your own on that one. So there's two comments that are actually very, very similar. So this one here is, I think it's pronounced Aladdin. You would be dead. It's just some kind of weird, incomplete copy of yourself, which is true. And Aaron has said about you're actually a copy of yourself, not the original. And I guess in both cases, that is correct. So you're ironically in the machine concept, you're saying you got your head, but you actually don't have your heart, and which is what you're saying about the soul. So they do go on and go hand in hand. So if you have one but not the other, you're not really you. So, but it depends.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So let's work on the assumption for the moment that you say, okay, sorry, you're going to say something?
Yes, but I was going to go off into a tangent. So go on.
You can tange away at the moment. So go for it.
Well, I've just finished reading a book in which one particular planet's population does kind of discover that they can put themselves into a computer, and therefore, in fact, what they're trying to do is control the population and also save resources. So for them, that's the focus. But of course, once they're in there, in theory, they live forever. And a guy comes in from the outside who is in love with one of the women involved. He's told she's in the computer now. You know, he can't ever see her in person again, but he can talk to her online effectively. And so he talks to her online, and she's trying to persuade him to join them. And he, for various reasons, is like, no, that's never going to happen. And then turns around to leave and discovers that because the way they've set it up is they transfer into the computer and then their bodies are destroyed.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, or because she wasn't a native of that planet, they decided they didn't have the authority to destroy her body. And so now there are two of her, one that's in the system and one that's in her body. And he, of course, you know, the story being the story and written in the 70s, he finds her and they run off together. But there's that comes up with that concept of, you know, the one that's still in the living body isn't going to live forever, but the version in the machine might. So that's a really interesting thought. Yeah.
Someone's bound to ask, so what's the name of the story?
The Power of Blackness. It's a 1970s. Jack Williamson, I think, wrote it. So it's you know, it has its flaws for sure. But there are some interesting concepts in terms of how species and planets and societies manage resources as much as anything else. Yeah.
So I think this is so Thomas mentioned about the Tomorrow War, and then has made a point of saying AI, a robot who wanted to be human would survive for 1,000 years just to live for one day. So robots, machines aren't really sort of, I guess, on a par with humans, because ultimately it's based on their programming, really, when it comes down to it. I mean, you could have a robot on a production line that builds cars. It could be around 6,000 years from now and it'll still be identical to what it is today. So I mean, there's not really apples for apples, but it probably made for a good movie, though. There's no denying that. So,
well, it'll depend on consciousness. It'll depend on, it's Pinocchio. It's, you know, that's a story that's been around for a very long time, but it only really kicks in if the intelligence is conscious, self-aware, sentient.
And it's also worth pointing out too that in a lot of science fiction movies, TV shows and books, it's always the machine that wants to become human, not usually the other way around, because, hey, ultimately it's humans watching this stuff. It wouldn't work if you said the crew of the Enterprise suddenly want to all become robots. People going, what? But if you had a crew of machines that wanted to become human, people could say, yep, we're dialed into that. So, you know, so yeah, you got to look at it from that perspective as well, from a storytelling point of view. But it would be interesting if someone said, you know, like Data says, I want to be human. And when someone said, no, I want to be like you because you're going to be around for 1,000 billion years. That is awesome. Imagine the amount of parties you can go to. But that would make for good storytelling.
Well, it does come up every now and then, that's for sure.
Very, very cool. And Thomas, he's just wrapped his head around the difference. I know it gets very, very confusing. So let's go back to, like, let's have a bit of a natter about the pros and cons from a physical perspective, or trying to work out how it would work. So you got your pill, right? And you go, I'm going to take this, and today, bang, I'm good to go. Now, you could ask yourself all these questions like, okay, is there a little like time thing on the pill that says, I want to wind back my time to be 20 years younger? Because the last thing you want to do is being, I'm 100 years old and I've got the immortality pill. You take it and you just stay that way forever, you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, these are very important questions to ask. And of course, I reckon this is an absolute classic. If you say, "Oh, look, I've got COVID today," I'm using that as bullshit excuse. I've got the flu, I've got an eye ache, I've got gastro or whatever, and I take the pill. Do I have that then forever? Right? I'm going to have gastro for the next 6,000 years because I took it at a time. It just solidified everything as it was right there and then. Or do you have to wait until you say, you know what? I'm free of all ailments, diseases. I've had my eyes checked, my teeth are good. Take the pill. We're ready to rock and roll. What do you? There's no answer, but I was just wondering.
The eyes is a good one because glasses or not glasses. Well, but I guess it depends on what the pill does. Like if the pill has this ability to perform continuous regeneration on your body, then it's probably going to repair all the illnesses and damage, which would wind back the clock, maybe not sort of the way you look, but the way your body behaves, I guess. But if it's something that, like you're suggesting, that just kind of freezes you in time, have you ever seen a movie called Death Becomes Her?
I've sort of seen it, but it was a long time ago. But yes.
So that's kind of the concept in that. They find out that their husband or whoever has a way of making people look younger, and I guess in theory they can live forever, but you have to maintain. And anytime something gets damaged, there's kind of no way to repair it. So by the end of the movie, the two women, I can't remember who the actresses were.
Yeah, Goldie Hawn, but yeah, I think you're going.
They've got like holes, bits that have broken off their arm that they've repaired with plaster and all that kind of stuff. So it depends on what the pill you're talking about is actually going to do. And I think that isn't going to work. I think the only one that will work will be something that will actually repair your existing body and continuously renew like all the cells and all the functions of it. Otherwise, you're just not going to be immortal. You're eventually going to fall apart.
Yeah, I think if you took it just at face value, because obviously this thing doesn't exist, I think that film would be correct. So if you did lose an arm, that arm isn't growing back, right?
Gone.
You're armless.
Yeah.
And if you have physical injury inflicted upon you, you're stuck with it. And of course, that then prompts the question. It's like, well, okay, what if in a really bad, like a plane crash or something, and body parts everywhere? I mean, what happens there? But we don't know.
At what point do you die? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. But it is a sort of, when you look at it from that humorous perspective, imagine saying, "Oh, I'm going to develop the pill, but I won't have it ready for the next 30 years." And you go, "Mate, I'm going to be like 90 years old when I take this." I was like, "That's no good to me. I've got to have it today." But yes, that would be a funny science fiction story, wouldn't it? Someone says, "Oh, and I'm ready to take it," but it's like, "Oh, yeah, I've stubbed my toe yesterday. I don't want to live with a sore toe for the next million years." Jeepers creepers. So one of the other sides of that, and this sort of leads on to this, and this actually did occur in a movie about freezing your age. We're not going to discuss vampires, but we'll just cover this one little bit. In Interview with a Vampire, Claudia, the little girl, is turned into a vampire. And even though mentally she ages, her body stays exactly the same. And I guess it's a bit of an offshoot of that. So conceivably, if you're going to invent the immortality pill, you'd want to do it at a prime time of your life, not when you're too young, which is obviously not going to happen, or when you're too old. But got to take these things into consideration, though. I tell you.
Absolutely.
So yes, but you do wonder, like, how, like, in changes of society. So, for example, now if you were like immortal 200 or 300 years ago, you could pass through everybody, through society without a problem. But today, with the digital footprint being so in your face, right? Yeah. And it's hard to imagine. I can imagine this scenario right now. So it's turning into a cashless society, right? So you go to a collector's fair, you scan your card when you go in to pay for the thing, you buy a few things along the way, tap, 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 and then you walk out, right? You've left an entire digital footprint of the entire time you were there and where you've been at any given point. Anybody could just draw a map and go, "Oh, you went from there, did a circle and came back out again." So if you took the immortality pill and nobody knew about it except you, do you think you could survive in this modern world without getting sprung by somebody who says, "Hang on, this dude's been around for 300 years. This is 300 years later. For 300 years, what's the deal with that?" What do you reckon? How do you reckon people would tackle that?
I think, well, it's getting harder now that travel is harder with the pandemic. But I think in terms of digital footprint, I think it would still be possible. You'd have to stay off Facebook. You'd have to stay off social media.
Not my Facebook. I can't give that up. Oh, Jesus. Not social media. No way. Yep.
Or at least not put your face on there, or not let anybody else ever put your face on there, because that facial recognition stuff is getting more and more, out there. But I think at the moment it's still possible. It would be difficult. You'd have to move and change identities and that kind of stuff fairly regularly. And that was one of the features of the movie The Man from Earth, was that he talked about having to, he couldn't really stay in one place more than about 10 years, because then people really started to notice that he wasn't aging. So he kept having to move on and live in different places and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because it's a bit of a balance. Because of the technology and what we've got now, it's going to be harder to hide. But there's also more capacity to travel and to live in completely different places than there has been in the past. You don't stand out as a stranger quite as much now as you would have even sort of 50 years ago, in more remote places and that kind of stuff. I think it could be done, but I don't know how much longer it will be possible.
See, the downside to it is that you think, I've taken the pill, I'm going to live forever, I'm going to have a whale of a time. It's awesome, right? But you've actually, as you said, you've got to hide in society. So you can't actually, like, if you get your picture in the paper today accidentally, and then someone sees you 20, 30 years later and go, hang on, you haven't changed a bit. What's the deal with that? And, you somehow become like, I can't enter like TV shows like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and whatever, because, they look at the tape like 60 years later and you haven't changed, and you can't go there, I'm my older, like my own father or my own son or whatever, because we just happen to look the same. I agree. It's not as easy as it once was. And if you sat and thought about it and you really wanted to hide yourself, because if people discovered who you were and what you have achieved, you'd get locked up. They'd say, we want to take you apart to find out what the secret is. So you'd almost have to go off to a third world country or something, just to disappear. Right. Like someone's mentioned here, how does one disappear these days? The only way really is to go to, like, as I said, Africa or some third world country where the digital footprint isn't so prominent, and disappear for a few decades and then come back out, make your presence felt, and then bugger off again. That's how I sort of see it.
I mean, I think it could be done. I think it still could be done, but it would be a lot. It would be difficult. And you're talking about what you've achieved. You wouldn't be able to achieve anything, because anything that you achieve that's going to get public attention is immediately putting you at risk. So, you couldn't be Richard Branson or Jeff Bezos because people would notice. There's just no way around it.
Totally agree. There was Bad Death Becomes Her. It was Bruce Willis, Meryl Streep, and Goldie Hawn. I got one of them right, so which is all kind of cool.
That's right.
Thomas said it's all forbidden for. Nah, it's not forbidden. We're just mucking around. I mean, it doesn't exist, so it's all kind of cool. Andrew said selected breeding for long life. Yeah, when there are plenty of people who will live long lives. We're talking going beyond that. And in the current age, if you do get someone that says, they've hit the world record, 126 years old or whatever, that's great. But their quality of life, you would think, wouldn't be that flash once you get past towards the hundreds and above. There are some people who do really well, but it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse.
And it's getting better and better all the time. That's the other thing. That selective breeding thing isn't as far-fetched as it seems. And of course, our healthcare systems, our medical knowledge and that kind of stuff makes it better and better. I have a friend whose grandmother, it was her 103rd birthday yesterday, and she still lives in her house by herself, and complains because her kids and grandkids won't let her climb a ladder to clean the light fittings. So it's getting better and better for people all the time.
I'll tell you what, if you use the Encounter at Farpoint example, this is the first episode, the pilot episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where Dr. McCoy appears, right? And he's like 150 million years old. He looks shithouse in that. And he's like, dude, mate, you'd want to not be around if you're going to look that ugly. Interesting one from William. So he's saying if the pill would cure any disease you might have. Well, we don't know. You would think it would, but then again, it might not. So immortality doesn't necessarily mean that it fixes everything up. The immortality pill doesn't necessarily fix everything up. It just freezes you as you are. So I think there are some stories, some sci-fi stories. Sorry, I'm just going to finish this. You may have cancer or whatever else, and it's terminal. They take a thingoid and like they can keep going as they are, but they're still crook. they're just not going to. It's not going to progress any further. Sorry, going to cut. So what were you going to say?
No, what I was going to say was, in terms of the sort of science, I think the one that cures everything is more likely to actually happen than the one that freezes you as you are. And so that's why I tend to lean towards, I think that's more likely, because I think we're talking about immortality, so in real life isn't really a thing, but just in terms of the science, to get that to happen, one of the things that would have to happen would be that it would fix whatever problems you had. And so I kind of think that that's a more likely scenario than the freezing in place.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Imagine saying to somebody, here's the pill, here's your pill. You can take it today, but whatever you got today, you're going to keep forever.
Yeah.
But the other pill where it fixes you up won't be available for another 50 years, right? And you go, well, what do you do then? So that's what I was saying earlier. You got to make sure it's like, okay, I don't have the flu, my eyes are okay, and my teeth are okay, I'm good to go, right? But if you said, oh, hang on, I've got a bit of heartburn, right? Or sort of like, I shouldn't have had that steam, that hot curry last night. I'll take the pill. Oh no, what have I done? You don't know, and that's the funny thing about it. We can laugh about it because it's all bullshit, but
I would never have thought about it like that.
These are the things you got to think of, Claire. You just don't know. That's the last thing you want. Oh dear. And nothing's going to fix it except forever. So quality of life wouldn't be very good, would it?
Well, that's another question, of course, is what happens if you change your mind?
Well, that's right. Yeah, and I reckon that would be tricky. Imagine saying and you think, because at face value, you'd be thinking, that's grouse. I get to see, like, we do travel to the stars and land on Mars and moon bases and all sort of bizzo. That's great. But there's a trade-off to it. So I don't know. So Hyland, you'd know about this, explores the exact same thing as future history books. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, Lazarus Long, that whole thing is about trying to live forever, and they do all sorts. He does all sorts of bizarre stuff, selective breeding being one of them. But yeah, it's definitely something that he explored quite a lot.
So Tom, I do a bit. Sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
Oh well, I mean, again, there are different options, different ways you looked at it. One of them was transferring his brain into a new body. There was the selective breeding. There's cryonics and that kind of stuff as well. There's a lot of interesting things that he kind of looked at.
Yeah, that's what Thomas has said about people, because the screen just moved, about people who are getting themselves frozen and cryogenically frozen and all that. The tricky part would be you'd want to do it when you're in your 30s or 40s, when you're at a relatively young age, because you don't want to wake up 300 years later old and decrepit. Well, you preferably wouldn't. Old and decrepit and whatever else.
But that's the thing. You wouldn't want to freeze yourself. When you're at that age, that 30, you're still living life and experiencing it. So unless there's a reason, like cancer or something, some terminal illness that you're only going to have a few months, maybe then. But, the people that freeze themselves at the moment are rich and old. And I'm not particularly hopeful about their chances of being revived in any condition to enjoy anything ever again at this stage.
You can imagine the scenario. You go, I'm a 35-year-old, I'm young and I'm virile, but hey, stick me in the frozen thing, and you're about to shut the lid, and you say to these people, what happens if there's a power failure? You haven't paid your electricity bill and all the power goes out. We're still going to be okay. And they go, hey, don't worry about it. It's all good. We've got this little generator on the back. It kicks in automatically. It's been playing up a little bit in recent times, so don't you worry.
There are so many things that could go wrong. So many.
Classic. Yeah, you're right, Aaron, from like Deadpool. Yeah, he's someone who's got given on to, and he doesn't heal. And yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? So you don't necessarily. It's a question of whether you feel the effects of it or not. And anyway. So as we said, it doesn't exist.
Deadpool's healing is weird. Like it heals everything except his skin.
Yeah, exactly right.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
See, Colin's figured it right out. Hate to live with the lingering effects of a dodgy Vindle. That's exactly right. and it's like, I've been around for 300 years, and I tell you what, I still don't feel that flash. Anyway, but it's an interesting one because at the start of the discussion, most people would say, yeah, it'd be awesome to hang around for the next 200-300 years and see what happens to the Earth, because it's the unknown You know, we think we know it's going to happen, but we've got no idea. But when you sit and analyze it a bit further, you realize, oh, hang on, maybe it's not that good after all. And especially if you're trying to do it in secret, you know, so nobody knows it's, you can live forever. That, you know, hundreds of years ago, no problem at all. But now, I don't know, it's a bit iffy. So, yeah, but it's a bit of fun, bit of shits and giggles. And I would, as I said earlier, I would not be surprised if someone out there is trying to work out, it's okay, how can we keep Richard Branson going? Because he's such a cool dude for the next 6,000 years.
Well, I don't know if it's because he's such a cool dude. It's probably more because he's paying me a lot of money. So I'll do the research and see what happens. I'd be surprised if there wasn't someone out there. I mean, there are people out there trying to find this. Of course there are.
Yeah.
But, you know, who knows what it'll be.
Yeah, exactly right. So very good stuff. So, yeah, who knows? And maybe transferring your brain or body parts into a machine might be the go. You have to do a self-service job, though. I don't know how you'd figure that one out. And, yeah, and, of course, the reason why, like, just very quickly, because we're going to finish in a couple of minutes, like with Picard, the TV series, the last episode, he gets turned into a machine, and he deliberately chooses not to sort of live forever. He still wants to live a mortal life. And aside from the fact you would have said, well, can't you knock like 20, 30 years off his life, make him a bit more younger and better looking? If he said, no, make me live forever, then he'd be the perfect example of it. And someone who was mortal who suddenly is immortal. So, yes. Very, very cool. All right, good stuff. Is there anything else that you want to bring up before we sign off for this evening?
Oh, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where we could talk forever, really. But
but we don't have all time to do it. It's like we're not like we're immortal. Imagine that. We're going to have the same discussion. You take the pill, I'll take the pill, and for the next 6 million years,
talk about it forever.
Absolutely love it.
I have a feeling we'd lose our audience quite quickly.
Oh no, you give them the pill too. That's the trade-off. We'll make the entire audience immortal, but you've got to sit and watch the two of us rabbit on for the next 1,000 years. Oh my goodness gracious me! You got to have a laugh. That's what it's all about. So it's very, very cool. Any final words before we sign off for tonight?
I don't want to live forever.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
I just want to enjoy the time I've got.
Yeah, totally agree. Just imagine though, like, you know, when Star Trek is rebooted for the 6 millionth time, you know, in 2153 or something. Oh, I'm still around to see it. I still remember the original series when it came out. Oh, it was awesome.
I'm not quite that old.
Absolutely love it. All right, so look, I hope you've enjoyed the show tonight. We're just pie in the sky, a bit of piss farting around it. Yeah, you got to have a laugh at these things, especially these days. Everybody's a bit unhappy with the lockdowns and curfews and whatever else, but you know, hopefully we can put a smile on everybody else's dial. So it's very, very good stuff. In the interim, though, so we'll see you all next Monday with another exciting topic of discussion, a bit of mind-rending, brain-leaking action, and whether you take an immortal pill or stick yourself in a machine, just remember to always stay in the zone. Okay, bye for now.